In the grand theater of American political discourse, few dramas hold as much sway over the nation's fortunes as the monthly unveiling of the Employment Situation Report. It is a rite that commands rapt attention not just on Wall Street and in the marbled corridors of Washington, but increasingly amongst everyday citizens who have come to recognize that the vigor of the labor market is existentially intertwined with the pursuit of the American dream. This week, as summer's last gasps fade into the crispness of early fall, all eyes will once again be trained on those all-important numbers from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Will August's data affirm the resilience of the American job machine after July's disappointing print sparked palpitations about a potential growth relapse? Or will the figures compound fears that a more pervasive economic malaise is taking root? The stakes could hardly be higher, for the August employment report represents far more than an ephemeral statistical snapshot. It is an arching window into the animating dynamism that has allowed the United States to remain the world's preeminent economic force through periods of wrenching global upheaval. A robust labor market is the beating heart that powers America's unique culture of aspiration, innovation, and upward mobility. When jobs are plentiful and wages rise briskly, the entire national temper is elevated, a surging tide that lifts all boats. Conversely, when the employment landscape falters and that sense of personal and collective progress is impeded, the American spirit grows fitful and fractured. It is during such times that the fissures of doubt and alienation emerge to rend the social fabric, with faith in bedrock national ideals like meritocracy and equitable opportunity drastically depleted. So as team after team of diligent economists meticulously tune their forecasting models, the rest of us would be wise to pause and consider just how much metaphysical heft has been vested in the august jobs figures. The stakes extend beyond the temporal realm of statistics and monetary policy signals. For this monthly rite has taken on deeply symbolic overtones, a delicate psychosomatic gauge of whether the American project itself remains soundly constituted, steadfastly advancing the causes of democracy and human potential as beacons to the world, or whether the national enterprise is dangerously listing, beset by decline, enervation, and creeping cynicism about the very precepts it was founded upon. These may seem like grandiose abstractions to associate with a dataset as prosaic as the current employment situation, but any seasoned observer of American affairs understands that jobs, earnings, and economic mobility represent the holiest of national obsessions. They form the core ideals that galvanize and perpetually renew the American spirit across generations. So as Wall Street anxiously pores over every decimal point in the jobs data, its traders would be wise to remember that they are not simply divining market-moving granularity, but adjudicating an entire civilization's sense of destiny and purpose. Nothing less than America's existential conviction about itself is rendered explicit in those pivotal numbers. That is the subterranean symbolic ballast borne by the BLS archivers when they unveil August's employment situation to the world on Friday morning. While their crisp charts and antiseptic data tables will dryly catalog fluctuations in payrolls and jobless rates, their findings represent nothing less than a referendum on the state of the national soul. Whether America's animating force continues to burn bright and brilliant, summoning the courage and creative ferment to continually reinvent itself and surmount every obstacle in its path, or if that singular spark is being steadily dimmed and extinguished, ossifying the national energies that once set America astride the world as a colossus of grit, daring, and perpetual renewal. This is the metaphysical backdrop against which the putatively arid employment figures will materialize on Friday, a moment of visceral reckoning in which an entire people hold their collective breath, awaiting an omen about their fate and sacred national credo. Of course, the August number crunchers at the BLS have no pretense that their datasets could possibly bear such cosmological freighting. And in fairness, their dogged methodological rigor is precisely why the jobs report carries such credibility and convening power across America's vast social, cultural, and ideological cleavages. But we would be remiss if we failed to acknowledge the talismanic quality with which the employment data has been vested in modern American discourse, as a barometer of the opportunities available to citizens to apply their innate talents, prove their merits through hard work, and steadily ascend the ladder of security and prosperity. These are the intangible values and aspirations that generations have invested in the American project, and they invariably flow back to one's employment status and earnings trajectory as the enabling force. A nation's soul is reflected through its attitudes about work and economic mobility. So while the numerates fixate dutifully on the month-over-month fluctuations, the casual observer would be wise to ponder the deeper social and philosophical meanings embedded in the jobs data. Each rising or falling percentage point does not merely signal a marginal economic drift, but ultimately whether America is keeping faith with its most sacred ideals about opportunity, self-determination, and upward mobility. It is a tension that has coursed through the American experiment since its founding days on the shores of New England and Virginia. As the revolutionary ideals of individual liberty and merit-based social standing flourished, they quickly ran aground against the stark realities of exploitation, privation, and a brutally stratified labor system. Yet, as the young republic expanded westward, the promise of economic opportunity and the dignity of work became anchoring national mythologies, powerfully animating social forces that inspired generations to steadily toil, innovate, and push outward the boundaries of what was possible. From the artisan craft guilds of colonial cities, through the factories of the Industrial Revolution, to the gargantuan corporate behemoths of the 20th century and today's dynamic digital startup spheres, America's conception of itself has remained inextricably intertwined with its attitudes about labor, earnings potential, and entrepreneurial self-making. These values have animated the entire nation through its most transcendent and tumultuous epochs. The forcible expansion into indigenous lands, sectional conflicts over the morality of exploited labor, internal migrations and immigrant influxes spurred by economic desperation and ambition, titanic struggles between capital and labor over workplace rights and equitable compensation, and the perpetual quest to ensure meaningful employment opportunities for all. Work and the manifest economic prospects it availed became the overriding American idiom of meaning and self-actualization. The capacity to channel one's talents into economically productive and decently compensated endeavors formed the core creed of American identity across all boundaries of race, gender, national origin, and circumstance. Among many critiques of America's societal shortcomings, few cut as deeply as the charge that too many citizens have been denied full access to dignified work opportunities and upward mobility. Slights to that ethos represent an existential rebuke to America's most cherished self-conception as a meritocratic land of unbounded potential. Which brings us back full circle to the immense significance invested in the monthly jobs report. Beyond its immediate impact on financial markets and monetary policy signals, the employment data has become indelibly emblematic of whether America is honoring its covenant about economic opportunity and self-determination. When payrolls are robustly expanding and wages rise in a vigorous job market, it reaffirms America's core identity as a place where talent and hard work are consistently rewarded with upward mobility. Conversely, stagnant employment and compensation levels pose corrosive threats to Americans' sense of societal legitimacy, a betrayal of the national credo that one's skills and labor should reliably avail rising prosperity over time. For a people who have staked their collective identity upon the dignity of work and merit-based ascension, a sclerotic job market does not merely spell dreaded economic insecurity, but a primal sense of societal injustice and mocked identity. That is the profound dialectic of meaning suffusing each monthly jobs report, one that transcends line-item statistics to reveal deep national truths about America's covenant with its citizens and whether that sacred promise is being upheld. So we return to where these musings began, with the symbolic portentousness that will accompany Friday's release of August's employment situation. As seasoned analysts parse the latest incremental fluctuations in payrolls and wages, the American public at large will be collectively discerning whether the nation remains fundamentally true to its animating principles. Do the numbers reaffirm America's abiding ethos of opportunity through toil, innovation, and entrepreneurial dynamism? Or do they signal a nation gradually decoupling from its most cherished foundation myths about merit, mobility, and the dignity of labor? The stakes could scarcely be higher as we await the august employment figures, for they will reveal whether the cornerstones of America's national identity and covenant with its citizens remain intact and fervently renewed, or are gradually being eroded in a changing global landscape. Naturally, the headline payroll number itself will be intensely scrutinized, with economists surveyed by Bloomberg anticipating a rebound to around 165,000 jobs added last month. This would mark a stabilization after July's paltry 114,000 gain, sparked full-bore recession panic across major financial markets. A sturdy rebound in August would go a long way toward assuaging fears that the American employment juggernaut is sputtering and losing torque after over a decade of vigorous expansion in the wake of the Great Recession. For the White House and its allies, a reassuring number would validate their assertions that the U.S. remains well-insulated from global headwinds largely due to sensible domestic policies that have nurtured and extended the current economic cycle. Critics would likely counter that any August payroll strength is little more than statistical noise, easily reversed if the economy's underlying fragilities are not more forcefully addressed. They would point to a concerning deceleration of job creation over recent months as portending more trouble ahead, especially as the lagging effects of Federal Reserve rate hikes combine with lingering supply shocks and borrowing costs that remain elevated in spite of the central bank's efforts. But for all the frenzied Wall Street forecasting and partisan wrangling over the monthly data swings, we must remain anchored to certain immutable truths about the August employment report's symbolic meaning for America. Far more than reductive talking points about monetary policy signals flashed in either direction, the jobs numbers represent a profoundly spiritual barometer for the nation's confidence in its identity and generational prospects. When payroll gains are robust and steady, it validates America's abiding articles of faith about itself as a proverbial land of economic dynamism, boundless mobility, and prosperity availed through diligence and commercial daring. A nation where the most elemental human striving to secure rewarding work and improve one's station through disciplined labor is routinely fulfilled. Conversely, when job creation stagnates and the share of Americans on the economic sidelines remains disconcertingly high, it mocks America's founding narrative about economic opportunity and ascendant self-determination available to all industrious spirits. It leads to creeping doubts that the national experiment itself has gone awry, that America is no longer an upwardly mobile meritocracy but a stratified system where mobility has ground down to insidious classism. These tensions have eternally simmered in America's socio-economic discourses since the Republic's founding days, manifesting in recurrent spasms of populism, labor unrest, intellectual movements extolling the virtues of productive work, and impassioned sectional debates about capital versus labor. Yet they have always found uneasy resolution when economic expansions took firm root to steadily rout joblessness and drive wages higher across the land, renewing that quintessentially American promise that hard work reliably begets advancement. So the stakes embedded in each month's jobs release transcend monetary policy forecasting games and hemmed-in partisan gambits. For the American public has a far more cosmic relationship with the employment data, viewing it as an endless national progress report on the vitality of core American ideals and societal legitimacy. When jobs are plentiful and workers earn steadily more over time, it reaffirms in the public's mind that the national experiment remains well constituted and its promises of economic security through diligence and commercial striving are routinely kept. The expanding employment roles signal a well-oiled meritocracy humming along, social mobility functioning apace, and the secular American dream of upward self-advancement still very much alive and achievable. But when the employment situation stagnates or contracts amid sclerotic growth, it foments deep-set fears that the gears of societal advancement have ground to a halt, that America is devolving from an equitable meritocracy into a neo-Dickensian miasma of penury and dashed hopes, where gainful employment and steady upward mobility through honest labor is no longer a reliable anchor of national identity and lived experience. These fundamental dualisms and angsts have simmered throughout the American experience, driving movements for the dignification of labor, battles over wages and workplace conditions, mass protests over employment discrimination, sprawling intellectual and ideological movements elevating the sanctity of productive work and its ability to affirm human worth.